The old castle, the ruins of which crown the rock, has a romantic legend attached to it. A Roman station is supposed to have existed at Istein, and the medieval castle, which completely dominated the Rhine at this point, was long held by Austria, and was a continual threat and grievance to the city of Basel. It was stormed and destroyed by the citizens in the year 1411. The legend is as follows. In olden times, there lived at the castle a gay young knight known as Veit of Istein, renowned for his valor and deeds of knightly daring. He had been a lad betrothed to a good and noble maiden, Jutta of Sponeck, a castle that lies on the Alsatian bank of the Rhine near Breisach, and the 30 miles which separated the lovers seemed as nothing to the youth who, on the wings of love and on the back of his fleet and trusty steed, made many a journey through the pleasant vine-clad hills that lay between his home and that of his fair lady. But the time was approaching when the long drawn-out romance of courtship was to be followed by the realities of married life. Just, however, as the time of the wedding was being fixed, invitations to a grand tournament to be held at the castle of the Count of Ankenstein were issued to all the knightly youths of the upper Rheingau. In hope of winning a prize, which he might lay at the feet of his bride-elect, was a temptation too strong for the young knight of Istein to resist. Taking what was at least meant to be but a short farewell of his betrothed, he arrayed himself in his best-proved suit of armor, and mounting his most gallant steed, set off in search of glory. Glory of one kind the knight of Istein certainly obtained, for, as it chanced, he bore away from every contest the first prize, and after many days of jousting, the golden chaplet of victory was laid upon his brow by the hand of the old count's daughter, the proud and beautiful Bertha. The lady's hand trembled as, for a moment, it rested on the knight's bowed head as he knelt before her to receive the crown, and as she supplemented it with the flower culled from her waist-belt, the knight, in his turn, thrilled through every vein at the light touch of the fair white hand, which he pressed reverently to his lips as he took the flower from it. Proud, beautiful, and cold, never before had the Countess Bertha bestowed a mark of her favor on living man, and it was with no small satisfaction that the old count perceived in what direction his daughter's inclinations were leaning. A braver, handsomer son-in-law than young Veit he could not wish for, and being quite in ignorance of the knight's betrothal to another maiden, he did all that he could to delay the young man's departure from his castle by fresh festivities, and to encourage by various little judicious arrangements, not unknown to parents, the love which he saw daily developing under his eyes. As for kindly, gentle Jutta, her image retreated more and more in the dim distance before the brilliant fascinations of the queenly Bertha. Indeed, it may be imagined that the young man actually forgot all about her existence and his plighted troth, for before long he found himself the promised husband of another. The news of Veit's enchantment by the Lady of Tirstein flew, as bad news does fly, to Sponeck. At first, as was to be expected, the maiden who was so near to being a wife refused absolutely to believe in the unfaithfulness of her lover, whom she had ever thought to be the very mirror of all knightly virtues. When, however, the reports became more and more confirmed, the simple-hearted girl, fired with a courage and a resolution unusual to her, determined that she would, in her own person, find out the truth or prove the calumny. In pilgrim dress, staff in hand, she set out on her lonely journey. At the village of Aisch, close to which rose on the other side of the river Biers, the castle of Tirstein, she found confirmation of the ill news which had reached her in her faraway home. There was no doubt that a marriage was in question between the beautiful Bertha and the stranger knight of Istein. Up to this moment, the unhappy Jutta had been sustained by an inward conviction of her lover's truth. Now, for the first time, the iron of wounded affection entered the simple soul of the faithful girl, and it cut it to the core. With lowered head and unsteady gait, she wandered away out of the village where the terrible revelation had come to her. By a sort of mechanical force, she still took her way in the direction of the enchantress's castle, which lay before her over the shining stream. Yes, this woman must surely, thought poor Jutta, be an enchantress, some wicked demon clothed in womanly shape, whom the archfiend himself had sent into the world to lure simple hearts away from love and duty. But she, Jutta, was, after all, decided the girl, brightening up again for a moment, strong enough in her love and devotion to break this wicked one's power to snatch her lover from the demon toils. When he sees me, whispered hope in her heart, the old love will return and happiness will come at once more. I will not be hard. I will pretend at first to be so. I will frown, but he will pray and entreat. He will take my hand, he will put his arm about me, and I will pout and turn away until suddenly, ah, how gladly, cried the girl, as she conjured up in her mind the happy scene of reconciliation. How gladly will I seal him with a kiss of peace, and give him absolution full and free. So absorbed was she in her daydream that she starts, as though awakening from sleep, at sight of two figures almost immediately in front of her. They are approaching, a man, stately and tall, a woman, stately also, tall and slender, and of dazzling beauty. The man's arm is thrown about the lady's waist, and his head bends over her in tender homage. The encounter is as a dagger to the heart of faithful Utah. In sight of her rival's dazzling charms, her own poor little powers of love and devotion seem suddenly to freeze up and to turn to ice within her. Yet she makes one last effort. She will look him in the face. When he sees her, when he reads in her eyes all her faithfulness, all her long affection, surely then, she treads on and stops in front of him, in his very path, her sorrowful eyes fixed full on his. I pray thee, pilgrim, says the young man lightly, have a care. Is there not enough room in this world for us and for thee? He does not know her. Alas, no, cries the girl. For her and me there is not room, that is true. Her heart has been already slain. What matter, she thinks, if the poor body meet with the same fate? A sudden frenzy seizes her. With one wild cry she leaps from the bridge into the foaming rapid water. At the same moment, the unfaithful lover recognizes the features of his deserted bride, and with a torrent of remorse that rolls back over his soul, like a long pent-up flood, the tide of his early and tried affection, he feels like a man suddenly awakened from a feverish and unquiet dream, opening his eyes upon the beloved object on which they had rested before he slept. So he stands bewildered. He stretches out his arms over the seething stream, calling pitifully by 100 endearing names upon his first and best and only love. Meantime, the unhappy Berta, half fainting with horror and dread, for surely she thinks her lover has lost his senses, sinks at his feet. But it is to the awakened knight as though he saw her not. She is but his dream, and he has wakened from it. Without a word of farewell, he leaves her lying a senseless heap upon the ground, and rushes madly on, in the direction which the stream too is taking to the Rhine. But there is to be seen no trace or vestige of the drowned girl, long since engulfed in the hurrying waters. Yet on rushes the knight, like one pursued, whither or with what aim he scarcely knows, except that it may be so much the further from the place which has now become hateful, as it was before dear to him. It was towards evening when he reached the ferry of the Rhine at Hüningen, where, scarcely conscious of his actions, he bade the boatman put him across the river. But in midstream, where the current was strongest, the oar suddenly fell from the boatman's hand. His arm felt as though paralyzed. The color fled from his bronzed cheek. There rose from the water the white face of a drowned woman with staring, wide-open blue eyes. It rose breast high, and showed on the left side in the region of the heart a gaping wound, then as slowly sank again. The knight hid his face with a cry of terror, and the boatman, gathering his wits together, steered his boat to the further shore, where he muttered with an Ave when his freight was safely landed, and did not wait for the fee which the unhappy wight, in his melancholy absorption, forgot to offer him. The knight, meantime, with the speed of the wild huntsman, made his way through the growing darkness in the direction of Istein, and arrived at the top of the castle rock breathless and disheveled, to announce in agitated tones to his astonished servants that they must at once make ready, for that he was about to bring home his bride. Without further speech, he rushed wildly down the hill again, advanced to a point where the rock overhangs the river, and leapt down into the strong, deep current. His servants, alarmed at the strangeness of his speech and manner, followed their young master with torches and lanterns. But arriving at the edge of the precipice, they could but see, as they thought, a white figure that rose steadily breast-high from the dark flood far below, and as gradually sank back down again. In the early morning, two bodies, that of the knight and of his deserted Utah, were recovered from the river by some fishermen, and carried by them to Istein. As suicides they were buried, not in consecrated ground, but on the river's bank, close to the spot where they were found. Bishop Berthold of Basel, however, who was a near relative of the Knight of Istein, touched with the sad fate of the young couple, subsequently blessed the place where they lay, and built there a little chapel, which has since been destroyed. From that time, however, all bodies found drowned in the Rhine above this point have been buried here, and it is a popular superstition that all drowned bodies swim to Istein, since it is there alone that they can find peaceful rest.